This video was brought to you by Brilliant. Pennsylvania is the swing state in this election. It has the biggest vote prize of 19 electoral college votes, and whoever wins the state will probably end up winning the White House too. Both candidates have spent tens of millions of dollars in the state, and have made a number of visits, often with their VPs, in the hope of gaining the upper hand in the Keystone State. So in this video, we thought we'd take a look at Pennsylvania's political history, how each party could win there, and why Republicans are feeling pretty optimistic about their chances at the moment. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. For most of American history, Pennsylvania has been a key swing state. As one of the 13 colonies, it's voted in every presidential election, and has voted with the winner 49 out of 59 elections. Unsurprisingly then, it's been targeted by both parties basically every election cycle. And according to analysis done by the Washington Post, since 1952, Pennsylvania has been the state targeted the most by both parties during presidential elections. Historically, the state has leaned Republican, but over recent decades, Democrats have made significant inroads. In fact, since 2002, Democrats have held the governor's mansion for all but one election in 2010, with 2022's election of Josh Shapiro being the first time since 1844 that Democrats have won 3 consecutive gubernatorial elections. In that same year, they also elected Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman to the US Senate, being the first time since 1944 that Pennsylvania sent 2 elected Democrats to the chamber. That being said, Republicans still have an advantage in the state legislature, controlling the Senate since 1994 and controlling the House for the large part of the last 30 years. Anyway, much like the previous ones, much of this year's presidential election has been centered around Pennsylvania. Now, because there are only a handful of swing states in this election, and Pennsylvania has a relatively large number of electoral college votes, whoever wins the Keystone State will probably win the electoral college. Nate Silver's forecast, for instance, estimates that whichever candidate wins Pennsylvania has roughly a 90% chance of winning the election overall. Both Trump and Harris have therefore done a number of rallies in the state, and it's seen by far and away the most political ad spend this election. Collectively, Trump and Harris have spent over $200 million in the state, more than twice as much as any other state. It's also where Trump superfan Elon Musk has spent most of his political activities, including his legally dubious $1 million voter registration lottery. So, with that in mind, what does it take for each party to actually win there? Well, for Democrats, their path to victory is probably through the suburbs, where voters are more likely to prioritize abortion as an issue, and are often turned off by Trump's erratic brand of politics. This is basically how Biden won the state back in 2020, after Trump nicked it off Clinton in 2016. Harris hopes that these issues of reproductive health and a woman's right to choose will motivate women, particularly younger women, to vote in large numbers. At the same time, Harris will also be hoping to skim off some white, non-college educated voters, with a recent CNN analysis showing her outperforming both Biden and Clinton in this demographic. These voters make up a large fraction of Pennsylvania's population, and while they mostly break for Trump, if Harris can switch a few of them over, that would certainly boost her chances. Nonetheless, the Republicans are still optimistic about their path to victory too. Trump has made impressive gains with poorer voters, especially black and Hispanic voters, which is why Trump does surprisingly well in certain urban areas, most notably in and around Philadelphia. At the same time, he's been able to hold on to most non-college educated white voters, and the polls have actually recently turned in his favor, erasing Harris's narrow but long-standing lead. Again, according to Nate Silver's aggregator, Harris had held a narrow lead in Pennsylvania basically since Biden dropped out, but now it's basically neck and neck with Trump, with both candidates on 48%. Polymarket, a crypto-based prediction site that has received a fair bit of attention this election, is even more bullish about Trump's chances, and currently gives him a roughly 60% chance of winning the state. Republicans have also seen an increase in the number of party members registering to vote. In the final week before October 21st, Pennsylvania's voter registration deadline, 27,000 Republicans signed up to register to vote, compared to 12,000 Democrats, and the previous week saw 15,000 new Republicans and 8,000 new Democrats sign up. Today, according to voter registration data, there are 3.9 million registered Democrats in Pennsylvania, compared to 3.6 million registered Republican voters. while in 2020 there were 4.2 million registered Democrats compared to 3.5 million Republicans. Despite that difference, Biden only narrowly won the state of Pennsylvania by 80,000 votes. Now, while voter registration isn't generally a good way of measuring political sentiment, Louisiana, for instance, has more registered Democrats than Republicans, but is still deep red. These numbers do show that more voters are identifying as Republicans than in years past, which bodes well for Trump. The current thing that's buoying Republican optimism is the early voting data. Now, before we get into it, a quick and pretty massive caveat, and that is that we really shouldn't infer too much from this early voting data. The isolated data isn't all that informative, and comparing it to previous election cycles doesn't really work either. After all, in 2020 there was a pandemic ongoing, and Trump was telling his supporters that early voting was a scam, a position that he's since U-turned on. Nonetheless, it's at least still true that Republicans are faring better in early voting than they did in 2020. As of Tuesday, Democrats are up 70-30, with a nearly 400,000 vote lead, while at the same point in 2020, Democrats were up 80-20, with a nearly 600,000 vote lead. This has nonetheless triggered some enthusiasm among certain Republicans, with Musk pointing out that if you extrapolate from 2020, the Republicans are on track to win the state handsomely. Although, again, it's generally not a good idea to infer, anything from early voting data, and you certainly shouldn't be extrapolating from what happened in 2020 for reasons we mentioned earlier. Nonetheless, as things stand, the race for Pennsylvania and the White House is basically a toss-up, and unless the polls change dramatically in the coming days, we'll probably just have to wait until Election Day to find out who's won. Now, the first results to roll in after polls close will probably come from Allegheny County, home to the city of Pittsburgh. And Harris is expected to win here, but her margin of victory is what you should be looking out for. For instance, Clinton got 56% in this first county, but then lost the state by half a point. Biden got 59.4% and then won by a point. John Fetterman got 63.4% and won by 5 points. And Shapiro got 68.7% and won by 15 points. So if Harris can squeeze out 60%, she'll probably win the state, and therefore probably the White House. Everything is still to play for. Now, what's something that the TLDR audience have in common? Well, they're willing to learn something new every day, and while our videos are a pretty good start, a lot of the stuff we talk about can seem pretty complicated, especially when we dive into analytics and detailed data. Luckily, there's a fun and easy way to learn more, which doesn't cost thousands of dollars or take years of schooling. That's because Brilliant is the best way to learn by doing, with thousands of interactive lessons in maths, data analysis, programming, and AI. Each lesson is filled with hands-on problem solving, broken down into accessible chunks designed around your busy schedule. That means that by spending just a few minutes a day, you can accumulate new knowledge over time in an actually fun way, and you'll feel the satisfaction that comes with bettering yourself and staying ahead. For instance, perhaps you promised yourself that this year you'll learn more programming skills, but you've just not had enough time, and the year's now coming to an end. Brilliant's growing number of programming courses are a great way to build the foundations and learn real-world applications with courses on Python, essential coding elements like loops and variables, and even developing your mind to think like a programmer. To try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/TLDR or scan the QR code on screen. Or you can just click the link in the description. That way you'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription. Thanks for your support, and thanks for watching TLDR.